A couple weeks ago when the earthquake hit the country of Haiti, those of us who had experienced this before knew that one of the immediate needs was going to be water. Their water cisterns were in the ground made of masonry, and virtually all of them were shattered by the earthquake. And so entire communities' only source of water was gone overnight after the earthquake. Literally within hours, we were moving pre-positioned water bags to La Gonave.
Since this morning, we've been bagging water, and now we are using a local box truck to transport water from the site to a sailboat on the dock, and the boat will bring water all the way up on the mainland in Miragouane, and this water will be taken by a box truck and to be delivered to schools and to the affected areas.
After the earthquake, both of us partnered to respond. Give Power focused on making the water, and then World Hope financed and organized the logistics of transporting the water to those in need.
Et nous disons un grand merci pour tout le support que vous avez nous et l'assistance que vous offrez avec toute communauté civile.
We have been able to ship water from the island to Miragan, Barraderas, Pestel, and to Jeremy. Then we took it by truck to get it back down into the areas where the needs were greatest. And so far, we've been able to ship almost 300,000 litres of water into these areas which were tremendously affected by the earthquake.
In every disaster we've operated in, there is an immediate event that causes fatalities, but that event also creates secondary challenges with last mile logistics. The roads get cut off, people can't get supplies they need, or normal supply chains have broken down.
What you really have is a lot of companies, churches, nonprofits, people that want to do something. And then out in the field, you often have local organizations, faith-based groups that can do something. In the middle is this logistics bottleneck.
If you don't have air assets, it's not like you just walk into a tent and ask for a helicopter ride or an airplane ride. You have to know the process to get that request in to the right people, how it's going to track, and what those time frames for turnaround are.
We're incredibly grateful that we were able to have 5 airframes, 2 helicopters, 2 Casa 212s, and a Aztec for passenger movements. As a result of this air bridge we were able to set up, we directly and primarily supported World Central Kitchen to get their kitchen set up in the impact site and core response. We were able to complete 174 flights, moving 391 relief workers. In addition to last mile cargo movements, we were also able to support 40 other organizations along the way.
Medevac missions would come in where they would request, for evacuation for medical reasons from up in the mountainous area. We were able to have some of our helicopters make their way up there and do approximately 87 medevacs.
A woman had just been pulled out from the rubble. Her pelvis had been broken and she was internally bleeding. We were told that if we didn't get this woman to a hospital that night, she was going to die. Because we had this helicopter, we were able to fly her to Port-au-Prince and get her into a hospital, and that saved her life.
The oxygen generators were out at one of the hospitals, and they were starting to see critical patient impact because of that. We were able to source the oxygen there in Haiti and able to move those oxygen tanks to the hospital that would give them a supply of about 3 days of oxygen until the generators were able to create enough so the hospital could start drawing off of that.
We were also able to leverage in 4 Chinooks from the US military and 8 Black Hawk helicopters. We were able to get 3 Chinook flights for tents and cots that supported Partners in Health in St. Boniface Hospital to be able to provide shelter for so many of the injured people that were there.
Anytime during a disaster event, you get into 4 and 5 days where you aren't hearing from the main government of your country. people start to get a little antsy on what's actually taking place. So the Prime Minister asked if he could make it to Jeremy. The roads were out, so there was no other way for him to get there. But he really wanted to get up there to let them know, they weren't forgotten. People were working to make sure that they got what they needed and that they were on his radar.
When we heard about the earthquake, or we made the decision to send a medical team to help people.
So with our rotor assets, we were able to pick them up. And it took about 2 hours from the time we left to get them from Loganov over to Lakai so they could start working in that hospital.
They have seen 1,135 people.
In every disaster, it's always locals that are the first responders to a disaster. The stronger they are, the more resilient they are, the better trained they are at doing that work, the more human life will be saved in the first 24 hours.
Moi capable de dire pendant 2 semaines ça me sentir fier. Équipe là sentir fier. Équipe là déployer tout lui-même pour faire travail ça.
Recevoir là avec à deux bras parce que nous pas de jamais joindre quelqu'un monde te venir rendre nos services ça. Nous dit bon Dieu merci d'être que nous voyons nous pas ici à te venir porter pour nous dit